Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So this week, Stripe CEO shared what he says is the coolest breakthrough since GPT-4, and what he's referring to here is a new piece of research from Cursor, which saw it deploy hundreds of different AI coding agents who each wrote millions of lines of code. We'll take a look at that study in more detail and what it might mean for the future of SaaS. Also coming up this week, YouTube's CEO reveals his somewhat contradictory AI roadmap for the year ahead. Leaked new data shows us just how quickly Gemini's API usage is growing, and Spotify tests a pretty unconventional new growth tactic. So stay tuned for all of that and more. And as always, if you do enjoy the briefing, then hit the subscribe and the like button. So Stripe CEO Patrick Collison said that this is the coolest breakthrough since GPT-4. And the TLDR here is that Cursor has figured out how to run hundreds of AI coding agents autonomously for weeks on end, where these agents wrote millions of lines of code. So this was an experiment where these autonomous coding agents were tasked with various different complex things. I'll put the link in the description to this piece from Cursor so you can read it in more detail. But to give you an overview, in this experiment, they asked these agents to build complex things. So, for example, in one experiment, they were asked to build an entire browser, and in another, they asked it to create a clone of Microsoft Excel. What they found was, overall, the system was far more effective than they had originally expected, but they said that hierarchy was essential to its performance. So to create this hierarchy, they created three different types of agents. So they had planner agents who continuously explored the code base and created tasks. Worker agents picked up these tasks and focused entirely on completing them without coordinating with other workers, and judge agents determined whether to continue at the end of each cycle. Cursor also discovered that it was GPT 5.2 that was much better at extended autonomous work versus the other models, and it was also a lot better at following instructions and maintaining focus. These experiments are still ongoing, and I'll put the link in the description to the Excel clone experiment, which is still ongoing. But why does Stripe's CEO say that this is the coolest thing since GPT-4? Well, I think there are three main reasons for this. The first is scale. So this scale is unprecedented. We've seen coding assistants before, but not hundreds of agents all autonomously writing millions of lines of code over weeks and producing something functional. So this leap from AI just helps you to write code to AI autonomously builds an entire browser, for example, or Excel from scratch is pretty massive. Anthropic's CEO was at Davos this week with the creme de la creme of tech, and he said that we're 6 to 12 months away from the stage where the model is pretty much doing all of the coding, which of course will have a transformative effect on product development, if he's correct, of course. The second reason is that it solves a coordination problem that human teams struggle with. So anyone who's worked in product development will confirm that even human engineering teams, or particularly human engineering teams, have trouble with coordinating with hundreds of other developers on a single code base. The fact that Cursor says that it's close to figuring out how to make agents do this effectively at scale is actually pretty exciting. This week, Satya Nadella echoed this change in the structure of teams when he was speaking on the All In podcast. So on this, he described a shift from siloed roles to a new era where things like product management, design, and engineering are combined to create broader full-stack builders, with app teams orchestrating multiple models by assigning roles to them to get better results than any other single model. And the third reason is that this is ultimately very practical. So unlike other research, these techniques are already informing Cursor's own product development process. For Stripe's CEO, this has direct implications for how his own software gets built. And some of Stripe's own team members have started to use AI agents internally to help them with all kinds of things. So Stripe's design manager, for example, this week revealed how he uses a vibe-coded in-browser prototyping tool that he built for himself. So AI coding agents are not only transforming the jobs of engineers, but gradually they're also transforming the other jobs that product teams do, like design as well. We'll take a look at some other examples of this in action later in the briefing. But setting these aside for a moment, the biggest impact of these AI coding agents is arguably on the SaaS industry itself. If these AI coding agents can autonomously build complex products like browsers and spreadsheets, then what does that mean for the vertical SaaS companies charging premium prices for these products? This week, a new report warned that vertical SaaS is under threat. So this is a new RBS Capital Markets report, and it warns that AI is now penetrating vertical SaaS markets that were once considered AI-proof due to regulatory complexity and domain expertise requirements. This report says that opinions are now shifting following the launch of 3 products this past week, including Claude for healthcare and life sciences, Claude Cowork, and an expanded labs incubator. As a result, shares of major software companies like Salesforce, Workday, Intuit, and Snowflake have all fallen between 6 and 13%. And this report suggested the AI overhang on software stocks will likely persist throughout 2026. And so for product teams, the critical strategic question is increasingly becoming, what can you own that an AI model can't replicate? And speaking of AI agents, if you're interested in learning more about the application of AI agents during the product development process, then you might be interested in this latest deep dive over on Substack. So in this deep dive, I explore several different examples of AI agents in practice, including some analysis of how DoorDash is using AI agent swarms, how Spotify is using background coding agents in its development efforts, how Instacart is using design agents, and more. So check that one out if you're interested in learning more about the real-world applications of AI agents in product development. Back to the briefing, and elsewhere this week, YouTube's CEO Neil Mohan has outlined the company's product roadmap for 2026. And if I'm honest, it's bold, but also a little bit contradictory. So on one hand, they're giving creators more AI tools, including the ability to create an AI avatar clone that can be used in shorts. But on the other, they're also promising to crack down on AI slop, with a commitment to building new AI slop detection tools. There's also a renewed focus both on shorts, which Mohan says averages 200 billion daily active users, and also on TV, where YouTube is now leading. The one group that seems to be increasingly forgotten by YouTube's product leadership team, though, is the average desktop user who watches longer form videos. So a quick glance on the YouTube home screen shows that the grid of longer form videos has actually shrunk, with more prominence now given to shorts. So there is a risk here that by trying to cater to each of these different user segments and viewing habits, they move too far away from what was once at least their core value proposition. Now, it's understandable why they've made these changes, because the market is pretty much forcing them into this position. TikTok has extended its formats into long form, and this week Netflix unveiled its product roadmap for 2026 with an announcement of its plans to overhaul its app. So this redesigned app is set to focus more on short form videos and podcasts, and their CEO said that the revamp was designed to better serve the expansion of our business over the decade to come. So with Netflix announcing plans for a new short form video app and TikTok expanding into longer form videos, YouTube could see itself squeezed further as it tries to cater to everyone. I can't help thinking that at this point, spinning off Shorts into its own dedicated short form video app may be a better option for YouTube. Since for me at least, the UX is starting to feel a little bit overly cluttered with too many different formats in one place. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. In other news, this week Spotify is testing out a new feature it calls Page Match, which will allow users to scan a physical page and start listening to an audiobook from that page. If you remember, Spotify previously acquired an audio company back in 2021, and given the low margins on music, audiobooks are a potentially much better revenue stream for the company. So while this feature is a delighter in many ways, it's also a discovery and activation tactic to try to drum up some of that revenue. Users don't always know what's available in the Spotify library, and so this feature removes any friction by creating a new entry point. So if users already own a physical version of a book, why not try the audio version? The question for Spotify, though, is how many users who own the physical version of a book also want to try out the audio version? Nonetheless, I think this is a pretty creative attempt at product growth. And speaking of the music industry, there were actually two interesting updates from ElevenLabs this week that demonstrate the impact of generative AI across other industries, including music. So this week, ElevenLabs released their very own first album called the 11 Album. This is essentially a showcase featuring songs from a diverse group of artists, including legendary performers like Liza Minnelli and Art Garfunkel, to more contemporary artists that I don't really know much about. And the project is designed to demonstrate the capabilities of ElevenLabs' AI music generation platform called 11 Music. The second example from ElevenLabs is a new piece that it published, which shows how it created its own user research agent. So the ElevenLabs user research agent is an AI-powered interviewer that ElevenLabs built to conduct customer interviews at scale. So they use this to run over 230 user interviews in just 24 hours. And this was for a specific product, their 11 Reader app. They say that an activity that would typically take weeks or months with human researchers, when you factor in things like scheduling, conducting interviews, and analysis, can be done in just a few days.
Overall, how are you using 11 Reader today? For example, are you listening to articles, ebooks, fan fiction, or something else?
I'm primarily using it to import EPUBs and to play fan fiction from different websites.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you.
They used Gemini's 2.5 Flash for this, and the agent asked a series of structured questions covering things like how users are using the app, what their best and worst features were, payment willingness, and brand perception, which further echoes what Microsoft's CEO Satya Nadella was saying about the blurring of the different roles in modern product development. Now let's take a look at some data and trends from the week. And so we'll start with this new leaked data, which shows that API calls to Gemini's models more than doubled last year, from around 35 billion calls in March 2025 to 85 billion in August of 2025. Now, we've talked a lot about the growth of Gemini across the channel in previous weeks, so this might not come as a surprise, but this is an excellent proxy to show how Gemini is increasingly being adopted by the enterprise market. This analysis by Menlo Ventures also echoes this sentiment as well, and as you can see from this graph, the market share of leading LLM providers for pure API adoption has increased for Google, but it is Anthropic that has grown from 12% in 2023 to 40% in 2025. This chart is bad news for OpenAI, and while Gemini's adoption curve is less steep than Anthropic's, given the low switching costs involved in switching out an API provider, it's not unreasonable to think that potentially Gemini may overtake Anthropic at some point in the future. Alphabet's upcoming earnings call will give us a closer insight into Gemini's revenue streams, and I'll put the link to that report in the description. And speaking of Gemini's revenue streams, one area that everyone is expecting to be hit pretty badly is traditional search, driven by the rise of AI overviews. And new analysis from Oxford University this week says that publishers expect traffic from search engines to decline by around 40% over the next 3 years. But this new analysis from development platform Graphite actually tells a slightly different story. They say that while SEO traffic has declined, it hasn't declined dramatically, so they say it's only declined by around 2.5%. Using data from SimilarWeb, which analysed over 40,000 different major US websites, they found that search traffic decreased only 2.5% year on year, and not the 25 to 60% claimed by other reports. They also say that search engine usage remains stable, so traffic to Google actually increased 0.8% in 2025, and overall search engine traffic grew 0.4%. Clicks to ads have increased 2.1%, but 90% of clicks are still actually from organic. So this report is painting a slightly different picture from the previous narrative that Google search is ultimately doomed. But on that note, I will leave it there for this week. Thanks very much for listening and watching, and I'll be back next week with another briefing.